And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to continue talking about absolute advantage and comparative advantage. So, in the last podcast, we just finished talking about who has an absolute advantage producing sweaters and chairs. And absolute advantage was just the idea of who can produce more of a good. That was absolute advantage. But now in this podcast, we want to talk about the idea of comparative advantage. Who is the lowest opportunity cost producer of a good? Who's the lowest opportunity cost producer of a good? So to do that, we are going to follow two rules to calculate the idea of comparative advantage. And those two rules are going to be, we always want to take the good that we are going to analyze and we're going to put it in the denominator. It's going to go in the bottom of our ratio. And then we always want to get the denominator equal to 1. We always want to be over 1. So let's just go through an example of how to do this. And this can be a little confusing at first, but once you do a couple of these, you'll start to get the hang of it. So let's first look at person A. We want to say for person A, what does it cost them to make, let's say, sweaters? So sweaters is going to be the good that we're going to analyze. So the good that we're analyzing, we want that to be in the denominator. Okay? So we're going to put 6 sweaters in the denominator, and we're going to say, how much time does it take person A, how many chairs does person A give up to make 6 sweaters? Well, in half a day they can make 6 sweaters. What's the opportunity cost? If they weren't making 6 sweaters during that half day, they could have made 2 chairs, because in half a day they can make 2 chairs. So that goes in the numerator. So what we're saying here with this ratio is every time that A makes 6 sweaters, he gives up 2 chairs. Okay? And then we said we want to always get that over 1. So how do I get that over 1? I would say, let's see, this would be 2 divided by 6. That's 0.33 chairs over 1 sweater. So every time that A makes a sweater, he gives up a third of a chair. That's his opportunity cost of producing a sweater. What's his opportunity cost of producing a chair? Well, for A to produce chairs, okay, now chairs is going to be the good we are analyzing, so it goes in the denominator. So this is going to be 2 chairs in the denominator. And in half a day, he can make 2 chairs. So what does he give up? Well, in that half day, what's his opportunity cost? In a half day, he could have made 6 sweaters if he wouldn't have made those 2 chairs. So that goes in the numerator, 6 sweaters. And then, of course, we have to get it over 1. We always got to get it over 1. So that's going to be, this is going to simplify to 3 sweaters. 3 sweaters over 1 chair. So that says every time A makes a chair, he gives up 3 sweaters. Now, let's do the same thing for person B. Okay, these are A's opportunity costs. Let's see what person B's opportunity costs are. So let's look at person B. So for person B, every time that person B makes 2 sweaters, sweaters goes in the denominator. That's the good that we're analyzing. Every time he makes 2 sweaters, well, in half a day, he could have made 2 chairs in half a day. So it's going to be 2 chairs. Every time he makes 2 sweaters, he gives up 2 chairs. And then we got to get that over 1. So that's going to simplify to 1 chair over 1 sweater. Every time B makes a sweater, he gives up a chair. And then what about when B makes chairs? So now when B makes 2 chairs, that goes in the denominator because we are analyzing chairs. And in half a day, he can make 2 chairs. Well, he could have in half a day. If he didn't make chairs, he could have made, 2 sweaters. So he gives up 2 sweaters every time that he makes 2 chairs. Get that over 1. And I have 1 sweater over 1 chair. These are B's opportunity costs of making a sweater and of making a chair. Now, Once we've calculated that, that's our first step in thinking about this. Once we've calculated this, we then want to say, who is the lowest opportunity cost producer? That's a mouthful. Who's the lowest opportunity cost producer of making chairs and sweaters? So remember, the lowest opportunity cost producer is the person who has the comparative advantage. That's the person who has the comparative advantage. The lowest opportunity cost producer is the person with the comparative advantage. So we want to find out who's the lowest opportunity cost producer, for example, of sweaters. Who can produce sweaters at a lower cost? Well, every time A produces a sweater, he gives up a third of a chair. What about B? When B produces a sweater, he gives up one chair. So A gives up fewer chairs to make a sweater than B does. So we would say that A is the lowest opportunity cost producer, which means that A has a comparative advantage in the production of chairs. I just said that backwards. A has a comparative advantage in the production of sweaters. He is the lowest opportunity cost producer of sweaters. Now, what about chairs? Every time A makes a chair, he gives up 3 sweaters. Every time B makes a chair, he only gives up 1 sweater. So then we would say B is the lowest opportunity cost producer of chairs. He has a lower opportunity cost to produce chairs, which means he has a comparative advantage in the production of chairs. He has a comparative advantage in the production of chairs. So we would say, finish this up, A has a comparative advantage in the production of sweaters. B has a comparative advantage in the production of chairs. And then in the next video, we're going to say, well, what's the importance of comparative advantage? What do we do once we find out who has the comparative advantage? So we will talk about that on the next podcast. We'll talk about specialization. So this has been Mr. Hagan on another Econ podcast, and we'll see you on the next podcast.